My wife said, "You made me feel invisible," yet somehow he saw every flaw she tried to hide. For a second, I honestly think I misheard her. My brain does this weird click like it's refusing to load the words. We're standing in our kitchen, the cheap LED light buzzing faintly above us, her back pressed against the fridge like she needs it to stay standing. In front of me, on the table between our coffee mugs, my phone lies face up, open on the messages I wasn't supposed to see. Her messages, the ones where she calls him the only person who really sees me. My hands are shaking so hard the porcelain mug next to my wrist rattles, but her voice is steady when she says it again, quieter this time, like the volume will make it hurt less. "You made me feel invisible, Mark," she repeats, fingers knotting in the hem of her oversized sweater. He didn't. Absurd part is that I want to crack a joke. That's my first instinct, deflect, make it lighter, say something like, "We've been sharing a bathroom for 8 years, I clearly see you," because that's how I've managed most of our arguments up until now. Joke, distract, hug, move on. But the words die in my throat when I look at her properly. Her mascara is smudged at the edges, like she's been crying longer than I've known, and there's this raw, defiant guilt in her eyes that I don't know how to meet. Behind her, the magnet holding up the grocery list is crooked, and I focus on that because if I keep staring at her, I'm going to throw up. I drag my gaze back to the phone instead, to the message at the top of the screen, the one that knocked the air out of me. "I feel like with you, even the messy parts of me are allowed to exist, like you see all my cracks and you don't flinch." Sent by my wife to somebody listed only as A. It was a Wednesday night when it all came apart. That feels important for some reason, like it should have been a dramatic Friday or some big symbolic date. But no, just a midweek nothing day. I work in IT project management, so emails, endless meetings, Jira boards, the usual soul erosion. Claire works as a high school art teacher. We live in a small 2-bedroom rental on a street lined with maple trees that look gorgeous in October and clog the gutters every other month. Married for 5 years, together for almost 9. By all accounts, if you looked at us from the outside, we were doing fine. Boring fine maybe, mortgage dreams, second-hand hatchback, arguing about whose turn it was to unload the dishwasher, that kind of fine. We had a shared calendar, a joint account for bills, and a Google Drive folder called Life Admin with subfolders for tax, insurance, vet records. We also had a running joke that we'd officially become that couple when we got excited about buying a new vacuum cleaner. We bought it last year and high-fived in the aisle. I thought that meant we were happy. Maybe not every day, maybe not the wild, electric kind of happy people write songs about, but stable. Solid. I guess that's part of why I'm here writing this, to figure out when solid turned into invisible in her head, and how I missed it. We met at a friend's birthday. Very cliché. Dim bar, too loud music. One of those long high tables everyone has to yell across. I was there because my coworker Ben wouldn't stop pestering me about getting out more, and she was there because the birthday guy was her cousin. She was the girl with paint on her hands. Literally, there were streaks of blue on her fingers where she clearly tried to scrub it off and failed. I remember saying something dumb like, "So you either murdered a Smurf or you're an artist," and she laughed this big, unself-conscious laugh that made me like her immediately. "I teach art," she said, which basically means I'm a professional glitter remover and teenage therapist. We ended up pushed together when people shifted around. We talked about everything, favorite movies, she loved anything by Studio Ghibli. I was more into sci-fi, guilty pleasure music. She unapologetically loved early 2000s pop punk. I pretended not to know all the words until my third beer, our worst jobs hers. Handing out flyers dressed as a giant pencil. Mine, tech support for people who didn't know what the power button was. What hooked me though wasn't just that she was funny or pretty, it was the way she paid attention. When I mentioned my dad's heart attack offhandedly, she didn't nod and move on. She leaned in, asked questions, remembered details. When she went to the bar, she brought back my drink exactly how I liked it without asking again. Nobody had done that in a long time. We had our first kiss in the rain at the bus stop, because apparently life does sometimes do the rom-com thing. A car swerved into a puddle and drenched us, and she shrieked, and I looked at her all dripping and furious and laughing, and then we were kissing. It was messy and cold and perfect. From then, it was a slow merging of lives. Weekend sleepovers turned into leaving a toothbrush, then a drawer, then a spare key. She met my mum, who adored her. I met her younger brother, who tested me with a grilling about football teams and my intentions, and then decided I was all right for a nerd. We fought, sure, over stupid things mostly, but we always found our way back. Claire has always been loud and quiet at the same time. Loud with her opinions, with her laugh, with the way she'd rant about the school's budget cuts. Quiet in other ways. She has scars on her thighs from self-harm in high school that I only learned about a year into our relationship, when she finally let me see her undressed with the lights on. She hates her nose and the way her stomach folds when she sits down. She often says she feels like too much and not enough simultaneously. When we moved in together, she made our apartment look like actual humans lived there, and not just one guy who owned 3 mismatched plates and a gaming chair. She hung her paintings on the walls, filled shelves with plants that I constantly feared I'd kill, and insisted we needed soft things, blankets, cushions, a rug, to make it feel like home. "You're good at the bones," she said once, standing back to admire the living room we'd just rearranged. "I'm good at the skin." I took that as a compliment. I still think, in a way, it was. So where did I go wrong? I've been replaying the last couple of years like a glitchy screen recording, pausing at moments that seem obvious in hindsight. The first big shift was when she became head of the art department. It was a huge deal for her, more responsibility, more say in the curriculum, validation that her work meant something. It also came with longer hours, more meetings, more stress. She started coming home tired in a way that sleep didn't fix. "Year 10s are feral," she'd groan, dropping her bag by the door. "I confiscated 3 vapes, 1 lighter, and a miniature bottle of vodka today." One of them drew a dick that was structurally impressive, I'll give him that, but still. I'd be at my laptop when she came in, halfway through an email or combing through a spreadsheet of project timelines. I'd kiss her, ask, "Bad day," and she'd nod, and we'd both slide into our routines, me finishing up work, her starting dinner, or collapsing on the couch with her phone. We fell into parallel lines, 2 people sharing space but running next to each other instead of toward each other. Dinner, dishes, TV, scrolling, bed. It wasn't that we didn't talk, we did, but the conversations became more logistics than heart. "What time is your appointment tomorrow? Can you pick up cat food? My mum wants to know if we're coming up next weekend." Sex became less frequent. At first it was just fluctuations, busy weeks, colds, period, whatever. Then it became a thing. I'd reach out in bed, hands sliding under her shirt, and she'd stiffen or gently remove my hand. "I'm exhausted, babe," she'd mumble. "Can we not tonight?" Of course I didn't want to push her. I'd roll over, tell myself not to take it personally. Except over time, I did. You can only hear "not tonight" so many times without starting to wonder if tonight is ever coming back. The thing is, I didn't tell her that, not properly. I sulked. I made jokes about my neglected husband needs that I framed as humor but definitely had an edge. When she tried to initiate once and I was stressed about a work deadline, I brushed her off without thinking. She didn't try again for a while. Looking back, that's one of the first places I made her feel invisible. I assumed she knew how I felt. I assumed she knew I still wanted her, still thought she was beautiful just because, well, because I'd married her. Like the ring was this permanent proof that I saw her. So I stopped actually saying it as much, stopped stopping in the hallway to just hold her, stopped noticing new earrings or the way she'd change her hair. Meanwhile, she started posting more on Instagram. I know that sounds stupid, but it was noticeable. More selfies, more artsy shots of her classroom, more stories with captions like "long day, send help and coffee," and then gradually more comments from the same username. It started small. "Love this. Your students are so lucky to have you. Then you look amazing as always." His name was Aiden. I didn't know that at first. All I saw was Aiden sketches or something like that. I assumed he was an artist she followed. No big deal. She has loads of art friends online. The first time I heard his name out loud was maybe 8 months ago. We were in the kitchen, she was chopping carrots, and I was telling her about how my boss wanted us to pivot to a more agile framework, which translated to do the same work with fewer people. "Oh, that sucks," she said, distracted. "We had something similar at school, with the Innovative Learning Initiative. They replaced half our planning time with pointless meetings. It's ridiculous." "Yeah, sounds familiar." Aiden was saying the same thing, actually, she added, more animated now. He used to do contract work for some education board, and they did this whole restructuring that looked good on paper and completely screwed the teachers. "Who's Aiden?" I asked, wiping my hands. "Oh, he's this guy from the Community Arts Center," she said. "I started going to the life drawing sessions on Thursdays, remember? He helps run them." I'd forgotten, honestly. She'd mentioned wanting to get back into making art for herself, not just teaching, and I'd said, "That's great, you should," and then promptly filed it away in the Clay as stuff folder in my brain and gone back to worrying about sprint estimates. "He's really talented," she continued. "His stuff's very raw, honest, you'd hate it." She smirked a little when she said that. "Why would I hate it?" I asked. "Because it's messy and emotional and doesn't have straight lines," she said, bumping my hip with hers. "You like buildings and clean interfaces." "Guilty," I said, making a mock wounded face. I didn't think much of it then. Why would I? My wife, the art teacher, talking about another artist. Of course they'd talk. Of course she'd find someone who gets the art world more than I do. I'm not threatened by that, I told myself. I noticed the texts later, not because I was snooping, at least not at first. Her phone would light up on the coffee table, once, twice, 10 times. She started doing that subtle tilt thing, angling the screen away, turning it face down, taking it with her when she went to the bathroom, which she'd never done before. My stomach would tighten, but my brain would jump in with, "You're being paranoid. Don't be that guy who polices her phone. You trust her, remember." One night, though, she was in the shower and her phone buzzed next to me on the couch. I glanced down automatically. A preview flashed across the top. "Aiden, you looked like you finally saw yourself today. I'm glad I got to witness that." My body went cold and hot at the same time. It's amazing how quickly a single sentence can turn your organs into static. I didn't open it, I swear to God I didn't. I just stared at the notification until it disappeared, and then sat there like a ghost until she came back and picked up the phone. I watched her face as she saw the message. The way her mouth twitched upward into a little half-smile before she schooled it back into neutral, because she remembered I was in the room. "Everything okay?" I asked, and my voice cracked just a bit. "Yeah," she said easily, setting the phone down again. "Mila, she's freaking out about her date tomorrow." I knew that was a lie. I knew it the way you know when milk has gone bad, even if it doesn't smell too off. Something in your body just recoils. That was probably the moment I became a cliché. The husband who becomes obsessed with the phone, with the passwords, with reading between the lines of innocuous sentences. I hated it, hated who it turned me into. But once I'd seen that name, it was like a splinter under my skin. A week later, we had our first real fight about it. It was late, we were both exhausted. She'd come home from a life drawing class buzzing, talking about how freeing it felt to draw for herself again, how Aiden had given her some tips on charcoal shading, how he'd told her she had such a brave line. I was chopping onions for dinner, eyes already stinging, and I heard myself say, "You talk about him a lot." She blinked mid-sentence. "What?" "Aiden," I said, keeping my voice carefully neutral. "You talk about him a lot." She frowned, leaning on the counter. "He's just a friend from the studio, Mark, relax." "I am relaxed," I lied. "I'm just saying, I don't think I know this much about any of your other friends." "Because they're not relevant to the story," she said, rolling her eyes slightly. "Jesus. Are we really going to do the jealous husband thing right now?" "I'm not jealous," I said too quickly. "I just—" "Then what?" she demanded. "You trust me or you don't, those are the options." I stared at her, at the onion half sliced on the board, at the ring on her finger. "I trust you," I said, and in that moment I wanted to believe it. I don't trust people who tell my wife she finally saw herself today and that they're glad they got to witness it. Her face went still. "You read my messages." "It popped up on the screen," I said. "Like it does. I didn't go digging, I swear, but I saw that and it bothered me." "Well, that's your problem," she snapped, color rising in her cheeks, "because nothing is happening. I'm allowed to have friends who see me as an artist, not just as your wife who remembers when your dentist appointment is." "That's a cheap shot," I said quietly. She exhaled hard, looking suddenly tired. "Look, I'm sorry you saw that, okay? I should have told him not to say stuff like that, but I promise you it's not what you think. Can you just trust me?" I nodded because I didn't know what else to do. We hugged, both stiff. We ate the stir-fry I burned because I'd forgotten to turn the heat down. We watched an episode of some series and pretended we weren't both thinking about the message. Things didn't get better after that. They got subtler. The late nights at the studio became more frequent. "We're working on a joint exhibition," she said. "It's a big opportunity. I need to put in the hours." I tried to be supportive. I went to the opening night of the exhibition, wearing my best shirt, holding flowers. Her work was beautiful. Dark, layered pieces that made my chest ache because they looked like her inside. Aiden was there, of course, taller than me with messy hair and paint on his jeans. He shook my hand, looked me straight in the eye and said, "You must be Mark. I've heard so much about you." I smiled and said, "All lies, I hope." He laughed, sounded charming, normal, the kind of guy you'd go have a beer with if you weren't busy being paranoid he was sleeping with your wife. At one point, I caught Claire looking at one of her paintings while he talked to her. He leaned in close, pointing out a detail. She tilted her face up toward him, this soft expression on her face like she was being seen in some new holy light. It made something inside me twist. I told myself I was being dramatic, that I was projecting my insecurity onto their friendship. Then came the text. Which brings us back to the kitchen, to my phone on the table and my wife's words hanging in the air like smoke. "You made me feel invisible," she said. "He didn't." I swallow, throat dry. Invisible how? I ask, because I need specifics or I'm going to spiral. I see you every day. I come home to you. We talk. We sleep in the same bed. Existing in the same space isn't the same as being seen, she cuts in, her voice sharp. You hear the words I say, Mark, but half the time you're not actually listening. I tell you about something that happened in my class and you nod and say, wow, that sucks, and then you're back on your laptop. I get a haircut and you notice 3 days later when Mila mentions it first. I pour my heart into these pieces and your feedback is, looks cool, babe. That's not fair, I protest, strung. I've come to every exhibition. I've literally moved furniture for your weird installation ideas at midnight. I know you've been there, she says, eyes glistening, but half the time it feels like your body arrives and your mind is still somewhere else. In a sprint review, in your email, in your life admin folder, and I get it. You're busy, you're stressed, but somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like a person you were actively choosing and started feeling like a piece of the furniture you dusted occasionally. That lands in my chest like a brick. I think of all the times I've checked my phone at dinner while she talked. The nights I've sighed when she started a conversation just as I was about to hit play on something. The times she's come home with a new piece of clothing or haircut and I've noticed, but not said anything because it felt, embarrassing, too cheesy. What does he do that's so different? I ask, trying to keep the bitterness out, failing. She laughs once, humorless. He listens, she says simply. When I talk about my students, he asks follow-up questions. He remembers their names. He sends me links to artists he thinks I'd like and actually cares about my opinion. When I show him a painting, he doesn't just say looks cool. He talks about the brushwork, the colors, what he feels when he sees it. When I tell him I feel like I'm too emotional or too much, he doesn't tell me to calm down. He tells me it's okay, that I'm allowed to take up space. And he kisses you, I say, the words coming out like glass. She closes her eyes, a tear slipping free. Yes, she whispers. There it is, the gunshot I knew was coming, finally echoing. How long? I ask, because of course I do. Everyone asks that, like the length of betrayal changes its shape. 3 months, she says, then after a beat, emotionally, longer. I laugh, a short, broken sound. Emotionally, I repeat. Right, because you were emotionally cheating before you physically cheated, so I guess that's supposed to be more honest somehow. She flinches. I'm not trying to justify it, she says. I know I screwed up, I know I hurt you. I hate myself for that, but it didn't start as this. She gestures vaguely, like indicating an affair with her hands. It started as me being lonely and him being there and noticing the cracks you didn't want to look at. I look at her, really look at her. The smudged mascara, the way she's holding her own elbows like she's trying to hold herself together. The faint lines at the corners of her eyes that didn't used to be there. The paint under her nails she can never quite scrub away. And you couldn't tell me you were lonely, I ask, quieter now. I tried, she says, voice breaking. God, Mark, I tried. I told you I felt like we were roommates. I asked if we could have a date night once a week, remember? You said, sure, let's put it in the calendar. And then work got busy and it became every other week, then once a month, then we'll do something soon, I promise. I bought that dress, that red one you like, and you said we couldn't go out because you had to prepare for a presentation. Her lip trembles. I sat on the bed in that dress and did my gradding instead. The memory hits me like a punch. I remember that night. I was genuinely stressed. I also remember opening the bedroom door at one point and seeing her hunched over a stack of papers, lipstick still on, the dress pulled up to her knees. I kissed her head, told her she looked nice, and went back to my laptop. I hadn't thought about it since. I start, then stop. What do I even say? I didn't realize. No, she says, not unkindly. You didn't, because you didn't want to. Because that would have meant admitting that maybe things weren't as fine as you thought they were. So when he came along and said, hey, I see you, that was it. I ask. That was enough reason to blow up our marriage. It wasn't just that, she says. He saw the parts I hate about myself and didn't make me feel broken for having them. She hesitates. You know those scars on my thighs, the ones I hide, I told him about them. I was terrified. And he just traced them with his fingers and said they were part of my story, not something to be ashamed of. He made me feel whole. The image of another man's hands on the scars I've kissed, the ones I've tried to help her heal from, makes my vision blur with hot, dizzy anger. I did that, I say, barely above a whisper. Maybe not poetically enough for you, but I've held you when you've sobbed about hatting your body. I've sat with you through panic attacks. I've told you 100 times that you're not broken. Did that all not count? Her eyes fill again. Of course it counts, she says. You've done so much for me, Mark. You've been steady and kind and patient. But somewhere along the way, it started to feel like you were comforting an old version of me you had in your head, not the person I was becoming. He saw. The version of me that exists now. The one who's angry and restless and wants more than routines. So I get points for past work but a failing grade on the current assignment, I say bitterly. She winces. That's not. I get it, I cut in. My voice is shaking, I realize. My hands too. I sit down heavily at the table because my knees suddenly feel like they might give out. You were lonely. I didn't see it. You met someone who made you feel alive and noticed and all that good stuff, and you fell for him. I'm not going to pretend I've been the perfect husband. I haven't. I've phoned it in more than I should have. I've taken you for granted. I'm not blind to that. Her shoulders relax the tiniest bit, like she's relieved I'm acknowledging my side. But, I say, and the word lands heavy between us, none of that forced you to lie to me, to sneak around, to send messages like I feel like with you, even the messy parts of me are allowed to exist while I'm in the next room trying to figure out if we can afford a holiday this year. You had a choice, multiple choices. You could have told me you were unhappy. You could have ended this before it got physical. You could have left me before you let him touch you. You didn't. She nods, tears finally spilling over. I know, she whispers. I know, I have no excuse. I was selfish. I wanted both. I told myself I deserved this attention because I'd been good for so long. I told myself I'd figure it out before it went too far. Then it did, and I kept choosing it. I hate that about myself. I hate that I hurt you like this. There's a tiny, petty part of me that wants to ask what too far means to her. Was the first kiss too far? The first time they slept together? The first time she told him she loved him? Has she told him that? I don't know. I'm not sure I want to. What do you want now? I ask instead. Honestly. She freezes, like she didn't expect the question. I don't know, she says eventually. I know that's a shitty answer. I know I should say, I want to fix this, I'll cut him off, I'll do anything, and part of me does want that. I don't want to lose you, Mark. I don't want to throw away everything we've built. But she looks down at her hands, twisting her ring. Another part of me loves who I am when I'm with him, or thinks I do. And that scares me, because I don't know if that version of me is real, or just some adrenaline junkie reacting to being seen again. So you're asking me to wait while you decide which man gets you? I say, the words taste foul. No, she protests quickly. I know that's not fair. I know I don't have the right to ask you for anything. I needed to be honest about where my head is. You've always said you'd rather hear the ugly truth than a pretty lie. Yeah, I say. I didn't realize the ugly truth would be that I was essentially a warm-up act for someone who can wax poetic about your brushwork. She flinches again. That's not how it feels in my head, she says softly. But it's how it looks from here, I say. Silence stretches between us, taut and fragile. The fridge hums. A car passes outside. Somewhere our upstairs neighbor's kid laughs at something on TV. It's surreal how normal the world sounds while mine is cracking. I can cut contact with him, she says suddenly, like she's grabbing at the last thread. Delete his number, stop going to the studio, change my routine. We can go to counseling. I'll do whatever it takes. I owe you that much. I let the idea sit in my brain for a moment. Couples therapy, blocking numbers, rebuilding trust, rewriting the narrative in my head every time she's 5 minutes late. I imagine her crying in someone's neutral office, talking about feeling invisible. I imagine myself listing all the ways I failed to show up. I imagine the shadow of him always hovering. Would that be for us, I ask slowly, or because you're scared of being the bad guy? Her mouth opens, closes. Both, she admits, voice cracking. I don't want to be this version of myself. I don't want to be the woman who cheats and lies and breaks the heart of the person who's done nothing but hold her. I don't know if we can fix it. I don't know if I even deserve the chance. But if there's any part of you that wants to try, I'll show up. Fully, not invisible. I look at her and I realize how tired I am. Not just today tired, but years tired. Tired of being the one who smooths things over, who jokes instead of fights, who quietly absorbs other people's feelings and pushes his own aside. Tired of wondering if what I offer, stability, care, showing up, is inherently less valuable than being the guy who sees poetry in scars. I used to think love was about choosing each other over and over, I say slowly. Even when it's hard, even when it's boring. I thought that's what we were doing. I didn't realize you were trial running someone else on the side. Fresh tears spill from her eyes. I did choose you, she says weakly, every day, and then one day I didn't. And then I kept not choosing you over and over. I know that. I'm so sorry, Mark. I believe you're sorry, I say, and I do, but remorse doesn't rewind time. It doesn't unsend messages where you tell another man he sees the messy parts of you better than I do. It doesn't unmake the choice to let him be the one who validates the flaws you were too scared to show me. We sit there, breathing. I don't know if I can stay, I say finally. Not right away, maybe not ever. I can't be in this apartment, using the same bed, knowing what I know and pretending we're just working through a rough patch. That's not fair to either of us. She nods slowly, like she's been bracing for this. Do you want me to go? She asks. I'll go, I say. My voice surprises me with how firm it sounds. You've got your job nearby, your school, your studio, whatever happens with that. I can crash at my brother's place while I figure things out. I'll come back for my stuff when we're both calmer. She chokes out a noise somewhere between a sob and a protest. I don't want you to leave like this. I don't want to leave at all, I say, standing up, but here we are. I go to the bedroom, grab a duffel bag and start throwing things in. Jeans, shirts, underwear, my toothbrush, laptop. My hands move automatically. My brain is floating somewhere above my body, watching it all from a distance like a badly written drama. Claire appears in the doorway at one point, hugging herself. Can I help? She asks, voice tiny. No, I say, and it comes out sharper than I intend. I soften it. I've got it. When I'm at the door, bag over my shoulder, shoes half-laced, she steps in front of me. Her face is blotchy from crying, nose red, hair falling out of its bun. She looks nothing like the composed woman in those studio photos I saw when I scrolled too far back on Instagram. She looks like the girl with paint on her hands I met at that bar, except more tired, more real. I know I don't deserve it, she says, voice shaking, but if you ever want to talk or try or yell at me, my door is open. I don't expect forgiveness. I needed you to know that you weren't crazy, that your feelings are valid, that you did see me once. I just stopped letting you. I nod, unable to trust my voice. Take care of yourself, Claire, I manage finally. It feels like a weird thing to say to the person who just blew up my life, but it's what comes out. You too, she whispers, please. And then I leave. It's been 3 weeks since that night. I'm at my brother's place, sleeping in his guest room that still smells faintly of paint because they never really aired it out after they redecorated. The first few days I existed on autopilot. Get up, shower, go to work, answer questions like "You okay, man?" with some variation of "Yeah, just tired." I haven't told many people. My brother knows the broad strokes. Claire had an emotional affair that turned physical. I walked. He called her every name under the sun on my behalf. It felt good and wrong at the same time. I've told one friend from work who listened quietly and then said, "You know this doesn't mean you weren't enough, right?" I nodded, but the words bounced off the wall I've got up around my self-worth. I haven't blocked Claire. We've texted about logistics, rent, bills, whether we're giving notice on the lease. She's somehow being very practical and very apologetic in the same messages. I find myself rereading them too often, picking apart every "I know I hurt you" and "I miss you" she let slip between discussions of furniture. I haven't asked about Aiden. I don't know if they're together now. Part of me needs to know, part of me never wants to. If I picture them, it's an itch I can't scratch. If I don't, they still exist in the negative space. I started therapy last week. First time in my life. The therapist, a woman with kind eyes and an office full of plants, asked me what brought me there, and I laughed in that way you do when you're about to cry and said, "My marriage exploded, and I don't know if it was my fault, or if I'm just collateral damage in someone else's midlife crisis." She smiled gently and said, "Maybe it's not an either-or." We've been unpacking things, the way I avoid conflict, the way I equate being low maintenance with being lovable, the way I slipped into the role of the stable one and never questioned whether I was actually expressing love in ways my partner could feel, the way Claire's words, "You made me feel invisible," hit some old bruise from childhood where being quiet and competent was how I survived. Here's the part I keep coming back to and the part I guess I want advice on. I can see now how I contributed to the distance. That's been the most painful kind of clarity. It would be easier if she were just a villain and I were blameless, but I was. I did forget to look up sometimes. I did treat her passions like background noise when I was tired. I did assume that love, once declared, maintained itself. What I didn't do was cheat. What I didn't do was go find someone who could see me better, and then blame my spouse for not reading my mind. I can hold both truths, that she was genuinely hurting and lonely, and that she still had agency in how she dealt with that. That I failed to show up in the way she needed consistently, and that she failed me by seeking that validation in secret instead of either fighting for us or letting me go. I think that's what I'm grieving the most now, not just the loss of her, but the loss of the story I told myself about who we were. I thought we were the couple who communicated well, who could get through anything, who would choose each other over the thrill of being seen by fresh eyes. Instead, I'm realizing we were two people with very different definitions of love. To me, love was staying when things were boring and hard. To her, maybe love was feeling constantly lit up, constantly special. Neither is wrong, inherently, but they're not compatible if you don't talk about it. I don't know what's going to happen from here. Maybe we'll sign the divorce papers and never see each other again. Maybe in a year, when the dust has settled, We'll meet for coffee and be able to talk like human beings about where it went wrong. Maybe she'll end up with Aiden and they'll have the life she dreamed of, and maybe that will work, or maybe she'll find out that being seen doesn't always feel like standing in good light. Sometimes it feels like being under a microscope. As for me, I'm trying to learn how to make myself visible to myself first, so I don't hand that power to someone else to grant or withhold. I'm trying to sit with the discomfort of knowing I wasn't enough for her, without deciding that means I'm not enough, period. I'm trying to remember that comfortable isn't a dirty word, and that being the guy who remembers your coffee order and fixes the leaky tap is worth something to the right person. If you're reading this because you're on either side of a similar situation, because you feel invisible in your relationship, or because you're the one who made someone feel that way, please, for the love of God, talk before you do what she did. Tell them you're lonely. Tell them you need more than logistics. Tell them you need to be seen. Give them the chance to look up. And if you're the one being told you made someone feel invisible, know that their experience is real, but it doesn't erase yours. You can own your blind spots without swallowing all the blame for their choices. Claire once told me early on that the thing she loved most about painting was layering. You never see the whole process, she said. People only see the final image and think it just appeared, but underneath there are all these failed attempts and changes and covered-up mistakes. That's what our marriage feels like to me now. A painting that people might look at from the outside and think, oh, that's nice, solid, comfortable, not knowing that underneath there were all these strokes that didn't quite blend, all these lines we kept painting over instead of dealing with. I don't know what my next painting, my next relationship will look like, but I know I want it to be one where both of us are seen in all our flaws and still choose each other, where being comfortable isn't an insult, but a foundation, where we don't confuse being invisible with being familiar. And if someone ever tells me again that they felt invisible with me, I hope it's because I failed in new ways I can learn from, not because I repeated this pattern. Until then, I guess I'm just sitting with the emptiness, learning to see myself in the quiet.